Still, though, it makes you wonder where the truth actually lies, because both sides have an interest in portraying their version of the story as well as they can, whatever propaganda it is that they want to get out there. And there's nothing inherently wrong with propaganda as long as it's telling the truth.
Free Talk Live.
From the hands of the Venezuelan troops to via bullets into the bodies of the opposition down there. For those that are maybe newer to the show and have not heard what's been going on down in Venezuela, it's hard to encapsulate it into a 30-second recap. But basically, the country has been devastated by hyperinflation and socialism that has resulted in people not trusting the elections anymore. There's two individuals who are claiming to be the president of the country. One, Nicolas Maduro, who was the most recent president. He's saying he's now in for a second term. And then there's another guy named Juan Guaido, who is claiming he is the true president of the country, that the people of Venezuela are fed up with this Maduro character and all the socialism, and so they're going to put a different socialist in. Juan Guaido. And so that's what the conflict has been. Different countries around the world, governments have been weighing in on who they are recognizing as the president, the true president of the country. So Trump, for instance, and a bunch of the Latin American countries, many in Europe, are acknowledging that Juan Guaido, they say, is the president, and Maduro is being acknowledged by countries like Russia and, I believe, Iran. Probably Cuba as well. In fact, we can talk about Cuba coming up here, too. There's an interesting story about them getting a little bit more internet access, which is kind of a game changer for people that are historically very oppressed and unfree. So the conflict there in Venezuela hasn't just been political. There's been a lot of protests that have been happening like in the streets.
Like everyday kind of protests?
Yeah, I don't know how heavy they are every day. Certainly, there's probably something happening on a daily basis. A couple of years ago, there was a prolonged...
It seems like there's nonstop protests in the news. I don't know if that's just fabricated.
It's hard to know what's true. I mean, as far as the news, I actually have, one of our listeners on our Discord server over at discord.lrn.fm put in our news and show prep room a link to RT. Now, remember, RT backs the current president, or Russia.
Russia does, yeah.
Right, and RT stands for Russia Today, and it's funded fully by the Russian government.
Well, it would be interesting if they had a different perspective.
They do, and that's what I was going to tell you.
Okay,
so
interesting.
RT has an article here and video, title, "Where are the empty shelves? Max Blumenthal tours Caracas supermarket." So the claim that we've made on the air has been that it's hard to find food, that there have been lines. I mean, over the last few years, these reports have been coming out fairly consistently out of Venezuela, that it's very, very hard to get the most basic food items, that many people spend hours and hours and hours, like 30-something hours a month, just waiting in lines outside of grocery stores to try to get whatever limited amount of supplies are being delivered to that store. And like if you try to take a picture of the line, a military guard who's standing and watching the line will steal your camera from you, right? So that's the claim, is that not only are these lines present and the food is very, very not so present, but also if you try to provide evidence of it and they see you doing it, they'll take your camera from you. They don't want to get it out.
It's interesting because I've seen pictures of lines, presumably in Venezuela, of these grocery stores. So I mean, people are either getting them or they're fake or something.
Wait, you're saying the lines are fake? Or the pictures?
I guess the pictures.
Yeah, I've seen a picture or two as well.
Because they're certainly plastered all over the news. Whether or not that, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean they are fake. It obviously, you could get a hidden, there's got to be, if this is happening every day, I have a hard time believing that there's going to be a guard who's going to be able to prevent a hidden camera from taking a picture or somebody.
Yeah, people are going to get the photos out.
Yeah, it's just, there's cameras everywhere. And even in Venezuela, you're going to have cell phones with cameras in them and things of that nature.
Still, though, it makes you wonder where the truth actually lies, because both sides have an interest in portraying their version of the story as well as they can, whatever propaganda it is that they want to get out there. And there's nothing inherently wrong with propaganda as long as it's telling the truth. But the question is this propaganda telling the truth on either side? So I mean, there's just so much to cover here. But let's start with the shooting, and then we can get into the grocery stores and see what you think is actually going on. If you want to weigh in, you can join us here. Our number is 855-450-FREE. The story from The Independent over in the UK, Adam Forrest reporting that at least one person has been shot dead by Venezuelan security forces during a clash on the border with Brazil. According to local officials, another dozen people were injured after troops opened fire in the eastern town of Cumarakpe on Friday, according to doctors and witnesses. Gran Sabana Mayor Emilio Gonzalez identified the woman who was killed as Zoraida Rodriguez, a member of an indigenous community. The mayor said the members of the Pemen indigenous group clashed with the Venezuelan National Guard and the army, who were moving tanks to the border. Gonzalez claimed the soldiers fired rubber bullets and tear gas. Some members of the area's indigenous community have expressed their support for the opposition's plans to bring in foreign aid over the border this weekend, despite the objection of President Nicolas Maduro. So what did Maduro do? I don't know if you heard, but he closed the border to Brazil.
Wow. The entire border was closed.
Yeah.
Not just the aid trucks?
No, the entire border has been closed amid an escalating standoff over allowing aid from the United States to enter the country. Some Venezuelans crossed over the border to the Brazilian border city of Pacaraima near Cumarakpe to stock up on supplies shortly before the border was shut, according to Brazilian media. Brazilian authorities are reportedly still moving humanitarian aid to the country's northern border with Venezuela. And on Friday, Brazil's Air Force sent a plane with food and medicine to Boa Vista in the northern state of Roraima. These will end up in Pacaraima, according to the Associated Press. Maduro said he was also considering shuttering the border with neighboring Colombia. The opposition has vowed to move aid from the U.S. and other nations over the border from Colombia on Saturday. So it sounds like things are getting, once again, pretty heated over there in Venezuela, where essentially you've got these two political sides that are playing against one another, and it's all politics. But unfortunately, all of this involves people's lives. We're talking about politicians who are making plays, political gamesmanship or whatever, over food stocks, right? Like food supplies to get into the hands of hungry people. I mean, if it weren't the case that people in Venezuela are hungry, then why all the show over let's get aid into the country? Why the numbers being reported from Venezuela of the average person losing like 12 pounds or 15 pounds in a year's time?
Ian, of course, it's fabricated by the U.S. government, so it's not real, and they want to keep out the enemy, the spy that's infiltrating their system, their government.
Wait, who's the spy?
Well, the aid trucks, of course.
Oh, you're saying that Venezuela's current government is worried about the aid trucks being U.S. Affiliated spies.
Right.
Gotcha. That's an interesting theory. It's just why you wouldn't want to allow people to bring food into your country.
Because then it's giving into that line of argument that there are hungry people in Venezuela.
Right, I see what you're saying. So they have to pretend like everything's fine here. We don't need your aid, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, if that were true, of course, and it could,
who knows?
Let's assume it is. Let's just assume it is. You probably don't want your enemy who's trying to depose you coming into the country with aid trucks. I mean, it's just going to be saying, yeah, you're right, my country has failed, or I have failed.
The toll-free number here, if you want to join us, is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. So again, this weekend, Juan Guaido and the opposition talking about coming in from Colombia over the border with the aid trucks. So Maduro talking about closing the border with Colombia. And of course, the reality is closing the border doesn't just keep aid from getting in. It also keeps Venezuelans from getting out. There's more on the way here. Our number is 855-450-FREE. What is the situation with the supermarkets there? We can look into that coming up as well on Free Talk Live. You can bring up anything you want. All right, so we were talking about Venezuela earlier here tonight, and there was just a few more things I think worth saying about it. Shots have been fired on the Venezuelan-Brazilian border. Venezuelan troops firing, a National Guardsman apparently, firing on indigenous people because the indigenous people are upset They don't want to see this Nicolas Maduro continue. They're taking the side of the opposition, and the indigenous group got in the way, basically, when the National Guard and Army were moving tanks to the border. So they opened fire against them. And according to the Independent over at independent.co.uk, they're closing the Brazilian border. They're also now talking about closing the Colombian border, where the opposition is vowing to move aid packages from the United States and other nations over the Colombian border as of tomorrow. Earlier today, an opposition lawmaker traveling across Venezuela in an attempt to collect the humanitarian aid at the Colombian border said someone threw 2 large rocks at a bus in her caravan. Mariela Magallanes of the opposition-controlled National Assembly said the pre-dawn incident was a direct attack that left a backup driver injured. Ms. Magallanes said the rocks went through the windshield on the passenger side and that the driver was being treated for injuries. Dueling concerts near the border between Venezuela and Colombia are set to take place today. Richard Branson, you know, that guy from Virgin, super rich dude.
Yeah.
Rocket space guy.
I took one of his planes here.
Did you really?
Yeah, to Europe just a couple weeks ago.
Well, he is sponsoring a Live Aid-style concert featuring dozens of musicians, including rock star Juanes in Colombia, while Mr. Maduro's socialist government is promising a 3-day festival dubbed Hands Off Venezuela on the other. So it sounds like Branson is siding with the opposition. He's siding with Juan Guaido in this conflict. Opposition politician David Smolansky said, quote, "The eyes of the world will be on Venezuela," unquote. 600 tons of aid, largely donated by the U.S., has been sitting for 2 weeks in a storage facility at the Tienditas International Bridge, close to where Branson's concert will be held. Maduro, of course, denies any crisis exists, insisting the aid is a ploy by the Trump administration to overthrow his government. By what? Feeding people?
I mean, sure, maybe, but it's like you are becoming a dictator, if I'm not mistaken, because
basically,
rejected the elections, or you've manipulated. I think it was manipulated the elections, and then
correct.
Congress disapproved them or something.
He formed his own Congress last year, or
right?
Late maybe 2017. They formed their own Maduro-controlled Congress and basically are trying to ignore the National Assembly. And the National Assembly is the one that's controlled by the opposition.
Okay.
And the National Assembly is not recognizing the new elections that Maduro is saying, I'm the new president. Well, the National Assembly is saying, no, you're not. This other guy is, Juan Guaido. And the Supreme Court, which is on the side of Maduro, is saying, no, Maduro is the president. And then you got all these other countries, the government, saying, no, Guaido's the president. But then Russia and Iran and I think Cuba are saying, no, Maduro's the president. So it's become this flashpoint for international conflict. And hopefully it won't result in invasions, because we do not want to see war break out in a place that's already, devastated economically. Because if it's bad now in Venezuela, having a war going on there is going to be way worse.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the war, I think, is more not so much that people die, but that there's not going to be anything accomplished. No. I don't think anyway. I think it's
best case you put another socialist in.
Right. It's in certain places there might be some advantages to going to war in the end if things work out well. But
when has that happened?
Until that, well. Yes, I mean until it actually works out well, obviously it's not good. So you definitely, I definitely think it's advisable to avoid war if at all possible.
So finally, the military of Venezuela has now placed a large tanker and 2 containers in the middle of the bridge at Tienditas to block supplies from getting across. So they're literally physically moving tanks to the Brazilian border. They're blocking off the bridge on the Colombian border because they don't want people to get food. Now, on the other hand, their claiming is everything's fine here. There's food on the shelves. Story over at RT they've got video of a dude shopping at a grocery store allegedly in Venezuela. And headline here, where are the empty shelves? Max Blumenthal tours Caracas supermarket. Corporate media grieve for the barren shelves and empty bellies in Venezuela, but are the alleged food shortages real? After touring a supermarket in Caracas, Max Blumenthal found plenty to buy, even craft beers. Quote, grocery shelves lie empty as food becomes increasingly scarce. Says a headline at the UK Independent. The country's shops remain open but are, quote, sparsely stocked, The Guardian laments. Even basic commodities such as toothbrushes aren't available for purchase, bemoans CNN. Quote, hungry, unquote, Venezuelans must choose between, quote, torture or starvation, according to Bloomberg's grim conclusion. Mainstream media coverage of Venezuela gives the impression that President Nicolas Maduro is slowly starving his own people, a narrative which, as journalist Max Blumenthal found after surveying a massive supermarket in Caracas, is wildly deceptive. The store offered a wide selection of meat, produce, and dairy, although no low-fat Greek yogurt, an industry which is, or rather an indignity, which is likely the result of Maduro's tyrannical ways, Blumenthal jokingly hypothesizes. Most importantly, craft beer, a hallmark of heroic consumerism, could be found in the supermarket's alcohol aisle. Blumenthal also marveled at the store's huge variety of scented toilet paper, shampoo, and toiletries. The basic commodities, which, according to CNN, are nowhere to be found in Venezuela. According to Blumenthal, quote, there isn't an issue here with food distribution or food scarcity. The issue is the buying power of Venezuelans has been completely destroyed because their currency has been so badly weakened by hyperinflation, speculation, and the flood of dollars that the government can't control here, as well as hoarding by private capitalist elements that support the opposition. Now, that's a conspiracy theory, if I've ever heard one. The idea that evil capitalists, who, by the way, are usually accused of wanting to make money, now the evil capitalists are, forget about making money. We want to hoard supplies to make the current government look bad so we can overthrow them and take control of the country. Usually, if you're a capitalist, and I'm not necessarily in favor of capitalism. I'm just in favor of freedom. You know, whatever it is that works. If you want to have your commune, go ahead. Have a commune as long as it's voluntary. If you want to be a capitalist, go ahead. Be a capitalist. You know, whatever. But normally if you're a capitalist, you want to be a capitalist so you can make money, so you can put your capital to work, so you can make a profit.
I mean, isn't that the underlying...
That's the whole idea.
Yeah, idea.
So why would a capitalist want to hold their inventory off the market for political reasons? It just flies in the face.
Doesn't make sense unless there's some capitalist reason to do it, like depleting, reducing supply to increase prices. But they're not allowed to increase prices, so yeah. I'm not really sure.
But they're not. The allegation here is they're just hoarding. They're not even increasing prices. They're just holding on to everything. Further, the claim here is that I agree with one thing Blumenthal says is that the hyperinflation. The hyperinflation is definitely a huge problem in Venezuela. I mean, that is government policy. They're the ones who are deciding to inflate their currency at insane levels. It has nothing to do with a flood of dollars. He says the flood of dollars the government can't control.
Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Right.
I mean, look at
money
North
coming
Korea.
in.
I mean, they're looking for dollars. Right. That's usually not a bad thing.
Right. Except in Venezuela, you're not allowed to have dollars.
Which is kind of insane because
it's so insane.
You need dollars in order to purchase goods from overseas usually.
Right. Because they don't want the bolivar.
Right.
That's for sure. There's more coming up here in moments. You can share your thoughts. So what's the real story? The Russian media here is saying, there's plenty of food on the shelves in these grocery stores. There's more coming up here. 855-450 free. This is Free Talk Live.
Does this have chamomile and aloe vera? No, it has chamomile. This is chamomile. Chamomile. Manzanilla. Thank you, Maduro. Okay, well, now we're in the pharmaceutical section.
Toothpaste, toothbrushes.
This is the video from RT.
Just basic commodities that aren't available or readily available to Venezuelans right now because of the regime that they're currently living under.
Oh, aloe vera. That'll match with my toilet paper.
With a guy who is just sarcastically walking through a grocery store.
Took me like a while to do that because there are so many varieties. Damn you, Maduro!
I mean,
we're now in the pharmacy.
So there's a lot of footage here from this grocery store. Lots of meats. Everything seems to be well stocked. And there are customers in this store.
No es un mercado socialista donde hay todos.
He says, is this a socialist market, or where is the socialist market where everything is free? Is it a lie that everything is socialism in Venezuela? And the man behind the counter says yes. So Venezuela is a socialist country. There's no doubt about it. Both of the opposition party and the current so-called president are socialists. Like, they'll tell you they're socialists. That doesn't mean that they are completely without commerce. Now, it's interesting, though, seeing this store. It makes me wonder, is this like a showpiece store? You know how North Korea has these sort of showroom stores where only the tourists are allowed to go. Only the people who are being shown the ideal North Korea are allowed in these stores. They're not for the average North Korean. They're for show. They're for display.
They've got like painted apples and things like that.
I don't know. No, I don't think that's true. I mean, you can actually buy things from these stores, and there's video of people going into the stores. Now, you're not allowed to record video generally in these stores, but in North Korea at least. In this case, this guy's obviously recording video. There's no problem with it, and I don't know. I'm not going to say I support Maduro just because there's a grocery store with some food in it. I mean, there are stories coming out of Venezuela about trucks with food being waylaid by criminal gangs who they don't want to hurt the driver. They just want to rob the truck. They're just hungry people who see an opportunity to get some food in their bellies, and they're committing a violent act in order to do that. But they don't want to kill the driver. They don't want to like beat up the driver. They just want the driver to not fight back. They want the driver to just simply, pull over. They've got spike strips or whatever. They run cars off the road, motorcycle gangs, whatever they can do to get their hands on some food. So, this makes me wonder, if you are in Venezuela and you can speak to this, because we did have a guy call in a couple weeks ago who Mark had met at the Bitcoin conference in Miami, who currently is living in the United States but is from Venezuela, so presumably has friends that are still in Venezuela. And, he says that you can still go to a bar and you can buy alcohol. So, I mean, obviously there's still some business being done over there. But you've also got these studies being done on the people of Venezuela saying the average Venezuelan is losing significant weight. Like, I think the last numbers we saw were like 17 pounds in a 1-year time frame. So is it all just fake? Is all that information false? Have we been, sold a bill of goods that is not true?
I can say one thing with some certainty, and that is I know somebody who actually did visit Venezuela within the last 5 years, and they got robbed, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So
where were they?
They were speaking at a university. I don't recall exactly where they were, what city or anything even. But they got robbed. They had a laptop stolen from them.
Well, now, was it like gunpoint, knife point robbery, or somebody grabbed a bag and ran?
I don't really recall,
because that's a robbery, right? When you are
I
threatened.
don't. I'm not entirely sure, unfortunately.
Because otherwise, it's just a theft.
It was within the last 5 years, and I don't know if it was like somebody ran and stole his bag, but I know his laptop got stolen.
Yeah,
and afterward, my partner actually had to reload another device to replace that one when he came back to the United States. So, yeah, I mean, there's certainly crime in Venezuela. It doesn't really prove one way or another, how bad the circumstances are, but certainly
it does.
It seems like from a non-scientific perspective that it's not the safest place to be.
Wherever people are desperate, crime will increase.
Right.
Wherever people are hungry, crime will increase. And, even the people who would normally never consider doing things like that will be, in some cases, feel like they have to in a desperate situation. If it's about feeding their kids or starving, they're going to do what they have to do. And I'm not saying it's okay. It's not okay to use violence against your neighbors in any circumstance, whether you be Nicolas Maduro or whether you be a thug on the street. It's all violence, and it's not okay. But I still want to know, what's the truth about these Venezuelan grocery stores? Is this store that this guy's in, and they mentioned the name of the store at the very beginning of this of the segment here. It's a 6-minute segment. I'm not going to play the whole thing. But is this like one of those showcase stores where it's only for the rich and the wealthy or whatever? Is this guy part of the Maduro propaganda? I mean, he's certainly paid by RT. This is an RT produced video here, I believe. Let's go on here a little more.
Because I have dollars, and the dictatorship of the dollar controls the world. Okay, so I had a pretty normal experience at the supermarket. I was able to get pretty much everything that I usually get back home in the States, including like this bag of craft beer, until my credit card didn't work and I had to pay in cash. I paid in dollars. And that really shows what the problem is here, that I had to pay in dollars.
I didn't know you could do that. I thought that you could not pay with dollars.
It's
legally in Venezuela.
Isn't it something like it's not legally allowed, but it's the kind of thing where they do it anyway?
Well, yeah, in the black market you can pay with dollars. I knew that.
Yeah, but the black market's kind of the open market in Venezuela. It's unless you can enforce, like, you have a police officer at like every grocery store.
Register.
I mean, you probably.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
but you would think a mega corporation this is a big store, right? Like, he's in a full-on superstore.
Look, even during Soviet times, like, there's a lot of corruption in these socialist countries. So it's
that's interesting.
It's probably like, even if there is a police officer there, it's like the grocery store is going to pay off the police officer.
Right, he's going to get $1.
Right, exactly.
He's going to be happy when he goes home. He got $1.
I mean, these guys are the police and the military are supposed to be like starving too, right? So
purportedly
not having been paid in months, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean,
let me go on here with his wrap up.
There isn't an issue here with food distribution or food scarcity. The issue is the buying power of Venezuelans has been completely destroyed because their currency has been so badly weakened.
Which is all about the government. I mean, that doesn't happen from the outside, which is what Maduro wants you to believe. His statements have always been like, this is an attack by the U.S. government. They're the ones ruining our economy. No. The U.S. government doesn't set your monetary policy, dude. That's all something that you did.
By hyperinflation, speculation, and the flood of dollars that the government...
So, speculation is a private investment, right? Like, when you speculate on a thing, if you bet that, for instance, the price of dollars are going to go up or down, or the price of oranges are going to go up and down, if you're speculating and you're buying stocks and you're buying these different monetary... I'm not an investor, right? Like, obviously, I don't sound like one. But you're speculating. You're taking your own money and you're speculating on things, which means that if you lose, you're just losing your own money. That doesn't affect the buying power of the money that you're using. That's just your own personal decision. And it might be a good one, and it might be a bad one. So it's the hyperinflation that's really the problem here, not to mention the government takeovers of various different industries. And I'm going to have to go back and see what the name of this store is, and maybe we can look it up online and find out, is this one of the grocery stores being run by the government? Because they have nationalized a lot of the industries there.
Yeah, they supposedly take it over. I wonder how much of the takeovers are like, oh, we're gonna take it over until we run out of food, and then it's just kind of gets abandoned, and then maybe they come back. Maybe the grocery stores come back or something. I
don't know.
They get taken over by the people who are maybe originally owned them, and they start selling groceries again. I don't know.
It's a good question. This definitely is there's a big question mark that this video puts on the situation down there in Venezuela, because all the reporting until this one has always been about barren shelves, long lines outside the stores. So what's the story? What's the real story in Venezuela? The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. How do you get the truth if you're not actually there? Is it even possible?
I don't know.
Let's go to Michael. He's in Aberdeen, Washington, listening to KBKW. Hello, Michael.
Hey, how you doing tonight?
Welcome. Good.
Well, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I heard you mention a little while ago about Venezuela's economy or financial situation that they're in, that the U.S. was not responsible for setting their internal economic policies.
That's right.
And yeah, I agree with that, but I think that you also need to point out that the U.S. is sanctioning them, and they're losing, $30 million a day because of those sanctions.
Yeah, no doubt. The sanctions, I do not support sanctions because sanctions end up hurting the people. I mean, the idea is it's going to punish the government, but it doesn't punish the government. The sanctions aren't taking food out of Maduro's mouth. That's for sure.
No, sanctions are violent against your own people. That just seems really messed up.
Yeah, they're hurting the Venezuelan people.
No, I mean, the sanctions are against the people. We can't do business. You and I can't do business with Venezuela. That's what a sanction is.
That's true.
How do you sanction somebody in another country that isn't under your control?
Yeah, good point. Good point. Michael, more?
Oh, yeah. No, that's about it, man. I'm about to grab some takeout food. So you guys have
What are you
a good
getting,
night.
man? What kind of food?
I'm getting some Chinese food.
Oh, you can't go wrong with that. You can't go wrong with that. Hey, thanks for the call, Michael. I appreciate hearing it from you.
All right, you guys have a good night.
Yes, sir. Toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. I'm glad he brought that up because that is something that the Venezuelan government can legitimately blame the United States for.
Oh, yeah. Lots of countries can actually.
Well, right, like North Korea, for instance, or Iran.
Cuba.
Cuba. Well, Cuba's things are starting to loosen up. So we're starting to see some changes in Cuba.
I don't think all of the trade restrictions and sanctions have been lifted.
No, they're not all gone. You're right. But they're loosening.
Yeah.
They're loosening a little bit. You can go visit now, which you couldn't do before. So tourism is a thing you can do now in Cuba.
Is it? Would I be able to go over and do tourism? Because I know a couple of years ago, people like reporters could go over, but you individuals couldn't. So there's plane flights
As
and
I
family,
understand it, you
but
can.
not random individuals.
As I understand it, you can. I'm not a travel expert, but I remember when these things were happening, when at the very end of the Obama administration, they started to loosen some of the controls on Cuban visitation, and I know Carlos Miller
remember that, but I don't. I was at that time. My understanding was that it was not allowed for the general population still, but if you were a family member of somebody like living in Cuba, or you were a reporter or something of that nature, you could then travel, legally under U.S. law anyway, to Venezuela. Obviously, people even before that were going to Canada and getting flights to Cuba, not necessarily legally within the context of U.S. law, but obviously, once you're left the United States, the U.S. doesn't really have control over it.
So from 2018, April, pretty recent.
Yeah.
Forbes magazine, Alexandra Talty talking about Cuba, and says here when Barack Obama rolled back regulations in 2014, making it legal and easier for Americans to visit the country without a tour group, there was an expectation of the floodgates opening for Yankee visitors. Major airlines worked for years to hammer out contracts, allowing commercial flights, while companies like Airbnb scramble to ramp up Cuban inventory on their websites. And by many counts, tourism is up. 2017, 600,000 American travelers without family ties visited the nation.
So that's interesting.
So it's
tourism is permitted then.
It's on now. Which is great news.
Yeah.
Because the more we can mix with these people in these other countries, the better off we're all going to be, rather than these artificial barriers being put up by governments. It's Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live. Listen live 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern, or grab the podcast. It's all at freetalklive.com.